what is the most horrifying thing you've come across in your time on this earth? The case of baby P may come to mind, a 17-month-old baby abused and murdered by his own parents who used to smear his cheeks with chocolate spread to hide the bruises and cuts they had inflicted upon him, as well as make it look like he'd eaten a tasty treat. While he was on the child protection register, he was still left with those same parents who beat him up so badly. Poor baby P suffered over 40 injuries, including fractured ribs and a broken back, and left inside his cot until he succumbed. What about well-known serial killer Ted Bundy, who kidnapped, raped, and killed dozens of young women, only confessing to 30 of his crimes after his arrest over a decade earlier, and often being described as handsome, charming, and charismatic? Maybe Jeffrey Dahmer, well-known serial killer, cannibal, and necrophiliac. These are but a few examples of what you know. Public knowledge, a quick Google search, and you can read all about cases like these. But have you ever asked yourself, what about those that I don't know? Surely, if these were solved and made public, they must be the tip of the iceberg, right? Right. In my line of work, I've come across cases in men, like I've previously stated, and worse. Whether the perpetrators be human or something more nefarious, I'm here to share the tales of some of my investigations. So, to start off with, my name is Theodore, but you can call me Teddy. There are two aspects of my line of work. The jobs I get paid for, such as hunting down cryptids for the government, assisting priests in exorcisms, or stopping hauntings by either banishing the force involved or laying them to rest. And as for the second aspect, it may take a bit of explaining. You see, I myself am a cryptid. In the paranormal community, individuals like myself are simply called the detached, or just detached, and since we are quite rare, you may not know of us. You see, all detached used to be normal humans. Our souls are sort of in limbo, between this world and the beyond. In my case, this happened during a near-death experience when my soul was in purgatory. Some paranormal entity intervened, if you will, and as a result, my soul remains in purgatory between worlds. And because of this, I'm blessed with abilities not typically found in the common man. A few of these would be the ability to see spirits, demons, and other entities. Another is enhanced regeneration. I can heal broken bones, missing limbs, cuts, and bruises in a matter of minutes to hours, and I can't die. Not until I've resigned myself, until I willingly leave this body and join my soul in purgatory so we can pass the threshold between worlds together. Others would be superhuman strength, resilience, and telepathic communication. Since my soul is between worlds, not entirely disconnected from me, I can go above and beyond the limitations of this plane of existence. As for the reason I'm in my line of work, rest assured there is a reason. I'm not comfortable sharing it here just yet, but I've been doing what I do for over a decade, and as I go along, I will be making multiple posts on this forum explaining my experiences, specific cryptids, spirits, demons, and how to deal with them, and reaching out to other members of the paranormal community to compare and share experiences. Anyway, now that you're all caught up, allow me to tell you my first story. This was when I had just started out doing what I do, taking place in 2013. Specific locations and names of persons involved will not be announced as to retain some semblance of privacy, but here it goes. This was one of the jobs I do on my own, meaning without payment. After nursing a hangover from the previous evening and surfing the web for a couple of hours searching for unsolved homicides and cold cases, etc., I had found one. In a small backwater town nearby, the remains of a young girl dating back over 15 years had been found buried in a small clearing. They had neither a name or a specific cause of death for her, although it was speculated that she had taken a blow to the head, evident by a fracture on her skull. The police had literally nothing but an idea of how she died. Feeling satisfied that I'd found my next case, I grabbed my gear bag, threw it on the back of my pickup, and headed down the road, figuring I'd start my investigation at the small clearing in which she had been found. Upon arriving, I saw that the area was cordoned off with police tape, but since nobody was in sight, I crouched under. The moment I entered the area, a cold shiver spread up and down my spine, assuring me that the tortured spirit was in the area. "Hello? Is anybody there? My name is Theodore Coulson. I'm here to help. Don't be afraid," I said in my most reassuring voice. You see, most spirits of murder victims, specifically children, tend to be quite skittish when approached. As you can imagine, going through your own grisly death must be quite traumatizing. It's a job in itself to earn their trust. I saw something out of the corner of my eye, a white figure hiding behind a tree. Deciding to approach slowly and non-threateningly, I placed my hands to my side, slightly raised. I'm not going to hurt you, I just want to know what happened to you, if that's okay. Getting closer now, I saw streaks of long blonde hair and a single blue eye peering at me from behind the tree. Her gown more visible now. It was torn and dirty, streaked with blood and dirt. Following her eye, I could see her eyeing up my belt. Not knowing whether it was the gun, knife, or belt itself which bothered her, I decided to slowly take it off and place it on the ground to further earn her trust. It's okay. I'm one of the good guys, I promise, I said in a light but firm tone. She began slowly walking out from behind the tree, giving me a better view on her condition. The police report was right. She had clearly received a hard blow to the head, a bald patch with bits of skin and flesh missing around her left temple, blood staining her face, hair, and pieces of the torn gown below. She was a young girl, maybe 8, 9 years old. Pale skin, blue eyes, blonde hair, and the remnants of a nightgown she clutched across her bruised and broken body. Still being pretty new to this line of work, I grimaced upon seeing her and begun to feel bile rising up in my throat. Attempting to hold down my breakfast and compose myself, I said, "Hey, what's your name?" in a shaky voice. I suppose she could sense the way I felt and the way I spoke, because a resigned look spread across her face as she looked at the ground. Of course, spirits take on the form of the way they were left upon death, and most either repress their memories of the event or retain trauma from it, making my job even more difficult. "I have a little girl just like you know," I said in an attempt to make her feel safe. She looked at me with a small glint of optimism in her eyes. I said, "Yeah, she's with her mother right now. I don't know what we would do if she was wandering around in the woods alone like you are. Maybe your mother would like to know where you are." I said this hoping to find out anything of who she or her family may be. She then looked at me with a resigned expression on her face, as if she wanted to say something but just couldn't. She opened her mouth to reveal a missing tongue. I understood. "Well, maybe I can follow you and you can show me something. I'm not leaving you until I've helped," I said assuredly. With that, she pointed in the direction that led deeper into the forest, and then started walking towards it. Now, usually I wouldn't follow a spirit into a forest, but my heart went out to this girl, so upon retrieving my belt, I obliged. After around an hour of walking, we came upon a worn-down log cabin that looked like it hadn't been occupied in decades. The girl came to a halt, her body froze in place as if reliving whatever I assume had taken place within this cabin. Walking up to her and crouching in front of her so that our eyes met, I said in the calmest voice I could muster, "It's okay. You don't have to go any further. How about I check in the cabin while you wait out here for me to be done?" She nodded enthusiastically as I got up, walking closer to the small structure, peering through the dust and grime-covered windows. It was too dark inside to make anything out. Walking around to the door and trying to open it, I discovered it was locked. "Guess it's a good job I brought my pack along," I muttered to myself. Pulling it off my shoulder and retrieving my crowbar from inside, the door opened without any struggle. And with that, the smell of a decade's worth of dust had spread throughout the air. Upon entering and retrieving my flashlight, I deduced this cabin was likely used seasonally for hunting, evident from the bear traps, empty ammunition boxes strewn across a table in the center of the room, the small generator outside, and the gas lanterns placed around the room which would illuminate it nicely. There was also a small area towards the back of the cabin which I assumed was for skinning and gutting animals, considering the black stains across the counter and the floor beneath, which I assumed to be blood. I decided to begin my search at the table, realizing there were cardboard boxes beneath. Pulling them out and peering inside, and what I saw still haunts my dreams to this day. Dozens of Polaroids depicting little girls in various states, from being tied up and bleeding, laying on the butcher's table with their hands tied, limbs missing, some of them with their heads shaved, all blonde-haired and blue-eyed. Upon seeing this, I shrieked and threw myself backwards, vomiting across the floor in the process. Whoever the sick, depraved individual who owns this cabin is, it seems as if the little girl wasn't his only victim. Taking a few minutes to regain my composure, I slowly got to my feet, took out all of the boxes from under the table, placing them on the surface to see if there was any more evidence. Upon sorting through all the photographs, I noticed singular handwritten words on the back of each of them, written in black Sharpie. But they made no sense. Deciding I would sort through them and attempt to piece things together when I was back home, I emptied them all into my pack. The next box contained what seemed to be an array of missing persons posters, milk cartons, printed reports dating back as far as the 80s from multiple states. My eyes widened. I was clearly dealing with a prolific and as of yet uncaught serial killer who was as of yet uncaught. Preying on mostly children, this man also had a specific type of victim, all prepubescent girls with blue eyes and blonde hair, which means he had to have a motive. Emptying the contents of the second box into my pack, I began sifting through the third and final box, another sick finding laid within, all the little girl's underwear. With a look of disgust, I searched through them to see if I could find any names embroidered into them, and surely enough I did. On one of them I saw the name Shannon on the back, as well as a letter placed at the very bottom, with an address and a name on it, Dear Mr. Kearney. After taking and folding the letter, I grabbed a box of underwear and some lighter fluid from the counter. Heading back outside and placing the box down, I squirted lighter fluid all over it and set it alight. It was too sick of a finding for me to take or to leave here. I then proceeded to walk back around the cabin, back to where the little girl was patiently waiting. Remembering the name I'd seen written on the underwear as I walked back over to her, I decided to give it a try. Shannon? I said, having my suspicions confirmed when her eyes widened and she nodded. I think I've found out who our guy is if you want to come with me back to my place while I go through what I found. I offered, and she responded with a short nod, and so we walked back to the clearing, entered my vehicle, and headed back home. Once there, I headed straight for my study, with Shannon tailing close behind me. Emptying the contents of my pack onto my desk, I began sifting through the photos and missing persons. After around 5 minutes, I looked over to see the girl looking over the Polaroids, her attention fixed on one in particular. It was her photograph. Hey Shannon, follow me, I said, leading her back to my living room. You want to watch some cartoons while I get to work? I said, turning on the TV. She nodded and sat down on the couch. If you need anything, come grab me. I'll leave my study door open, I said, switching the channel to cartoons and retrieving a bottle of whiskey and a glass to take back to my study. I would need it after all. No sane person could do this sober. Heading back into my study, I remembered the words scrawled on the back of each photograph. Maybe they were each a part of a message, a sentence maybe? So I cleared my desk and took a swig of whiskey straight from the bottle, before pouring myself a glass. I got to work reading the words on the back of each photograph. Them find hid I remains you'll the never. And within a minute I had a clear message. You'll never find them. I hid the remains. This seemed to be a direct message to law enforcement or whoever else came looking. But if that was so, why would a name and an address be included on the cardboard boxes? Did he want to be caught? Was it a trap? I had all these questions swirling around in my mind when I heard a knock. It came from the front door, which snapped me back into reality. Walking out into the living room, Shannon was on her feet, now looking worried. I just laughed upon seeing the familiar face of Murph, a fellow detached and investigator like me who had worked on a case with a few months back. It's okay, Shannon, he's one of the good guys like me, I said as I answered the door. Sorry, we don't want to buy any Girl Scout cookies, I said upon answering the door. Very funny, he said while entering the house. You see, Murph is ex-military, and he wears his medals proudly when he's on a job with a beret. So, who's this? He had said once he had closed the door, eyeing up Shannon, who was once again sat on the couch watching cartoons. My new client, Shannon. She can't talk though, so don't bother trying. Follow me, I'll show you what I'm working on, I said, leading him out to the hallway and into my study. Wow, this is some pretty sick shit. So Girlie in the next room is one of the victims? He said. Yep, one of around 50 or so from what I've seen, dating back decades. Who knows if this guy's still active? I say, a solemn expression spreading across my face. Which reminds me, you still got those buddies in the department? I need some names run. The next few hours we spent mostly sorting evidence and locations of the missing persons and dates. We'd established that he'd been targeting young, blonde, blue-eyed girls across multiple states from the early 80s, each killing spaced out over by about a month or two, running in a straight line across multiple states, starting with Oregon and ending with Shannon, who was abducted in Kansas in the early 90s. After placing the missing posters in order of time with their photographs accompanying them, we established that after entering Utah, his victims had begun appearing to be in the cabin I'd explored, meaning the girls abducted from the previous states were brought here to Kansas and slaughtered. The killer clearly had a strategy, since the place even Shannon was abducted was still pretty far from here. Even if it was within the same state, nobody would come looking for these girls in a forest miles away. Maybe this was how he avoided capture for all these years. After a long evening of establishing a timeline, motive, and piecing together who these girls were and when they were abducted, we decided to call it a night, planning on heading to the address I'd found the next morning. After a long and restless sleep plagued with nightmares, I was awoken by Murph shaking me.
We got his name! Seamus Kearney! Wake the fuck up, Teddy, come on!
I sat up, rubbing my head, attempting to stave the hangover with no such luck. Right, tell me what you've got on him, I said, curious as to what he'd discovered. Get this, man. The guy's record is fucking clean. No previous arrests or infractions with the law. Only thing that stands out is he went kinda off-grid in the early 90s. No family, no children, nothing. The guy's a literal nobody. This isn't really remarkable, considering most avid killers tend to not want to call attention to themselves when they do what they do. Then you have an entirely different variety, the ones who hide in plain sight and are pillars of the community. And what about the address we've got? I said. He still owns it. As far as we can tell, he still lives there. Come on, get up, I'll drive. He said that with his usual sense of enthusiasm. After getting up, I grabbed my pack and began to head out to Murph's car, Shannon trailing close behind us. We decided to pick up breakfast at a diner along the way. It gave us time to think about our strategy. Provided he was there and this wasn't a trap, we needed to find a way to lay Shannon and her fellow victims to rest. I know what you may be thinking, but we couldn't arrest him. That isn't the way these things work. Justice and death and unfinished business either counts on these girls' remains being found, identified, and their families knowing what happened to them, a sincere apology from the killer followed by their own death, or simply the killer suffering as they did, followed with a death. A few of these are unethical, though, and since Seamus had dozens, if not hundreds of victims, the first would be impossible. That leaves either an apology in his own death or simply torturing him until he succumbs. Considering we're not batshit fucking crazy, the last one is out, leaving us with the apology, then killing him. As for what happens to a killer once they die, or what happens to a spirit if not laid to rest, the killer doesn't come back with unfinished business. Black figures we call mores appear and drag their spirits off. As for what happens afterwards, we don't know, but I can't imagine it's anything nice. As for the victims, if they're not laid to rest over a certain amount of time, their souls begin to degrade, not meant to be left in this world for so long without a body. They forget all of who they once were and all of who they are, but are left with one thing on their minds: vengeance, pain, suffering, anger, and confusion. When this happens, the only solution is to banish them, since in that state they can actually harm the living and will do so without discrimination. We call these things shrieks, since that's what they do. They wander our world screaming and hunting. This is what makes my job so important. Without people like me and Murph, this world would be overrun with such creatures. Anyways, back to the story. Me, Murph, and Shannon continued driving along, entering the town in which this house was located. Anticipation and anxiety spread between the three of us upon arriving outside the address. We were met with a large but disheveled-looking house, looking like something straight out of the Addams Family. We know what we're doing, right? We'll simply knock first, make sure to hide your gun, keep it accessible though, and no military talk. We don't want this guy thinking we're narcs, and if he refuses to open up, we break the locks and forcibly enter. You've got the photographs, right? I said with the most serious look I could muster. Yeah, buddy, I got him. Good. We're gonna get this sick fucker to confess, then put a bullet right between his fucking eyes, I say with a hint of malice in my voice. We reached the doorway and knocked on the large oak door and waited in anticipation for an answer. It must have been like 4 minutes until we saw some curtains over by the living room window part, one sickly bloodshot eye looking directly back at us. Fuck, muttered Murph, who had just been readjusting his holster at the time. Fuck indeed, I say as we share a look, knowing exactly what we have to do now. I kick the door as hard as I can. The hinges split and it falls onto the floor. We were met with a putrid amalgamation of cigarettes, weed, alcohol, and some sticky sweet smell which we both instantly recognized. Unholstering our weapons, we made a straight beeline into the room we had just seen Seamus in, only to be met with a shotgun pointed right at us. Jumping onto the floor and opening fire, I took his trigger finger off with a single shot, but I was too late. The blast of the shotgun ringing in my ears, I looked over and saw Murph clutching his chest. Shit! He yells out. That fucking hurt, you prick! He yells in the direction of Seamus. That was when I got a good look at him. Laying on the floor, clutching his hand with blood trickling down it, was the disheveled form of a man, a shell of a human being wallowing in the filth of his own living room. With widened bloodshot eyes, filthy silver hair, an unkempt beard spread across his cheeks, wearing clothes that looked like they hadn't been changed in years. What the fuck are you? He slurred, clearly drunk. The law, motherfucker, uttered Murph. Giving him a look of disapproval, I said, Really, man?
To which he replied, "Sorry, I've always wanted to do that." Getting up, I kicked Simmy's gun away from him, grabbing the photos from Murph's pack. "You recognize these, you sick motherfucker? I said fucking do you? Speak!"
I said it in the most aggressive voice I could, but I was only met with a look of utter shock and despair on his face. "No, I swear to God, who are you?" he cried out.
"I'm fucking sure you don't," I said, heading back out the room. "Keep an eye on this motherfucker," I say to Murph. He nods to me as I head out to retrieve Shannon. Bringing her in the room with me, a look of fear spreads across her face as she jumps back, a small scream leaving her lips as she's met with her killer. This confirms all of my suspicions, and I know exactly how I'm going to get his heartfelt apology. I look back at Seamus laying on the floor with a confused and terrified look on his face. "Apologize right fucking now, and we will go easy on you."
"Apologize for what? I swear you guys have the wrong guy."
I say, heading out into the hallway and down the basement stairs. Upon descending them, the putrid aroma grows stronger. I grab my flashlight and click it on as I'm met with the corpses of over a dozen children in different states of decomposition and dismemberment. I see their spirits standing around the room, some of them staring directly at me, all of them with that same look of despair. As I bend over and puke my breakfast up across the stairs, a couple of the children approach me, retaining the same injuries their corpses had, all of them blue-eyed, blonde-haired little girls. After regaining as much composure as I could, I noticed I had begun crying.
"Who are you, mister?"
uttered one of the children. "I'm one of the good guys," I said in my teary tone. "We're laying you guys to rest. Please follow me if you can." I say that as half the group follow me up the stairs. As I enter the living room, once again followed by the children, I look Seamus in the eyes. He knew I'd seen his little slaughter room downstairs.
"I'm a sick man. Please, take me in. You guys are cops, right? Take me in, buddy. I need help,"
he says in desperation. I simply shake my head in refusal. Not even blinking, I walk over to him, placing my hands at his temples as his eyes roll back into his skull. I see everything. All of his past, all of what he had done. I hated doing this, peering into the minds of sick individuals such as him. I suddenly knew his motive. I knew why he had done what he did. I almost felt myself feeling sorry for the man, but I caught myself. As a child, Seamus had a 13-year-old babysitter named Maya. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. When his parents went out on date night, she would take him to his bedroom and undress them both, and you can guess what happened after this. Seamus, upon reaching the age of 10, went alone with her in his bedroom, tried to refuse what she was doing to him, her getting forceful and beginning to hurt him, and as a response, he hit her over the head with a toy he managed to grab from the floor, and he didn't stop. He just didn't stop. Her brains were paste. He killed her. Coming from a rich family, Seamus's parents covered it up, but evidently his trauma grew to become an obsession. This is why he had done what he did. The telepathic ability us detached are blessed with allows us to allow others to tap into our abilities. I used this feature to bless Seamus with the sight, so he could see his victims gathered around him in an attempt to receive his heartfelt apology. Upon seeing them, his eyes widened and he screamed and crawled into the corner. The victims began approaching him.
"Help! Help! Fucking please, help!"
He screamed, still not apologizing, his victims simply staring at him. Seamus jumped across the floor, retrieving his shotgun, and before we could stop him, he blew his brains out, all across the wall behind him. Me and Murph looked at each other with shock, believing our efforts to be in vain. There was no way to receive an apology from Seamus now, meaning these girls were stuck here until we could identify who they were and tell any family they may have. But then he appeared. Seamus's ghost, half of his face missing. He looked at us as if to say, "What the fuck?" And then we heard the nearing moan of the Maoris coming to claim Seamus. They raised up from the ground, moaning, these specters of pitch blackness, grabbing Seamus by his arms and legs as he tried to fight them off. Screaming as best he could with half of his face missing, Seamus was dragged back underground. And with that, he was gone, left to his fate at the hands of the Maoris. Thinking it was over, me and Murph began preparing to search the house when a doorway appeared, a doorway of pure light. As it turns out, allowing Seamus to see the girls had constituted his torture, and him committing suicide had sealed his fate. The girls began walking towards and through the doorway, all of them now wearing white dresses, their injuries seemingly healed. All of them had entered except from Shannon, who just looked at me with a smile. "Thank you, Teddy," she said to me, waving at me and Murph before stepping through the doorway herself. "We need to get fucking drunk," I heard Murph mutter to me. "Yeah, man, let's go," I said as we left the building. And there you have it. the conclusion to this first story you'll be seeing of mine, my first serial killer encounter. The ironic thing is that despite the fact I hunt cryptids for a living, Seamus was the first real monster I'd ever met, and the worst of them too. Cryptids mostly hunt for food or based on instinct. Seamus had done it out of pure malice. Excluding his babysitter, he never needed to kill, yet he had because he wanted to. I've seen a lot of shit in my time, been in a lot of messed up situations, but nothing haunts me quite like that basement. Those photographs I'd found of those little girls. Those poor little girls. Anyways, I now have a cryptid hunt to attend to. Gotta keep food on the table and some malt liquor in my stomach, right? I'll be posting about the next job I'm doing as soon as I can, as well as another job I worked. Until next time, friends.